Calvinism makes God out to be a tyrant, a despot, inscrutable, arbitrary, capricious, fixed, the static force who is primarily moved not by love, but by the good pleasure of His will. Certainly a loving person might fear such an entity as this. But how could a loving being be attracted to such an offensive concept of God who would damn most of the human race merely for the good pleasure of His will? Independently, mind you, of any good or evil that these pitiful creatures have done. The God of the Bible, on the other hand, as opposed to the God of Calvinism, the God of the Bible is represented as a moral governor with benevolence toward all and malice toward none, who sacrificed His Son not primarily to appease His wrath, but to provide a way in which He might wisely and justly offer forgiveness and mercy to all, and at the same time uphold His holy law and satisfy the claims of public justice. The Calvinist concept of God robs man of his humanity and puts him on the level of a machine or an animal or a puppet. Not only does Calvinism demean man, but it demeans God as well. Calvinism violates all civilized rules of conduct and behavior. Calvinism gives a law to man that it cannot obey and threatens him with eternal damnation for not obeying. Calvinism, and I know this argument doesn't seem to impress Mr. Allison, but Calvinism is contrary to all the rules of reason and the laws of logic. And I submit to you that the logically false cannot possibly be scripturally true. It does represent fatalism. What hope is there for the reprobate? None. Everything's determined. That is fatalism. Calvinism reminds me more of Islam. If there be any sin that was not decreed, then something has come to pass in time which was not decreed from eternity. So therefore, God has decreed sin. And if God has decreed sin, then God is the author of sin. But God is not the author of sin. According to the Bible, Lucifer is the author of sin. Makes God the author of sin. He chose its existence when it did not exist, and makes Him the cause of all misery and impurity in the universe. Where is the mercy, the compassion in the Calvinistic system? He did not choose to elect or reprobate because men were miserable or evil, virtuous or remorseful, but simply because He was pleased to save some and damn others. But God responds to repentance. God responds to remorse. That's mercy, when He responds to our sorrow over our sin. The idea of moral government is to deal with men according to their character and conduct. The Calvinistic system excludes such an idea entirely. God has made us feel that we might do otherwise. We're all aware of the fact that we might do otherwise. We're all aware that we made a choice to come and listen to this debate. But all the time, he knows we can't do otherwise. Because he has determined everything. If true, then the God of Calvinism is deceptive. The God of Calvinism is not good and benevolent, but cruel and malicious. He commands one thing and decrees precisely the contrary. He commands us to obey, but has decreed that the reprobate can't obey. He says, I have no pleasure in the death of him that dieth, when in fact they die for his pleasure. According to John Calvin, according to Tope Lady, he pleads with man to change his course, but in fact he urges them on to sin and ruin. Suppose the sinner could obey his command when it is not so ordained. Then he could be damned for violating God's will. What hypocrisy on the part of God, if true. What duplicity, trickery. No wonder men turn to atheism. And I find as I deal with skeptics on campus, their arguments aren't against the Christianity as represented in the teachings of Christ and the prophets and the apostles, but the traditions of the church and often the doctrines of Calvinism.